Welcome to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast with Julie and Thomas Hobby. We are marriage coaches who help couples with pain points about money, intimacy, and communication go from being overwhelmed to being secure in their marriage.
If this is your first time listening to us, thanks for checking out our podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. Let's dive into this episode. We are kicking off a new series this week called Thriving, Not Just Surviving. Welcome to episode 36 of the Marriage Puzzle Podcast, titled Marriage and Miscarriage. And this one is close to us, and so it's a little bit of a heavier episode. So we hope you'll hang in there with us on this one because it's important to talk about.
Yeah, actually, our listeners, when we said we were going to do a podcast series, Thriving, Not Just Surviving, we gave a list of things we could talk about, and 85% said to talk about miscarriage and marriage. And so even if this hasn't happened to you and your relationship, you probably know a friend who you can learn this to share with them or be there for them, or of course pass the podcast to them, because they say miscarriages happen in 1 in 4 pregnancies. So it's more common than even I knew before our journey began.
Yeah, and if you, again, aren't going through this directly or haven't been directly through this in your own marriage, like Julie said, that you might know somebody who is, and it might at the very least just give you some insight into what they're going through or how you might be able to help them or something like that. So we just want to start off by telling our story around this and how we got kind of to this episode, the events that unfolded to kind of create this episode. So back in, when were the kids born? 2014. So
8 years ago.
8 years ago. There we go. 2014. So 2013, we started trying to have kids. We had been married for, what was it, 7 years at that point, something like that. And so we were 28 or so, 27. I'm trying to
so much information.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to make sure that it's told why. I mean, we didn't this wasn't right at year 1 of our marriage.
We got married I was 19, Thomas was 20 when we got married, and so we did want to wait a while before having kids, and just enjoyed those 7 years. We weren't trying throughout until we decided about that 7 year mark.
I mean, and at that 7 year mark, it was actually, it had been more of a fight for us up until that point. That's a whole different episode.
I wanted kids since like day one.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a young mom, and it really was a fight. That should be an episode, but maybe next week.
Jot that one down. But yeah, so we started trying to have kids sometime in 2013, and we immediately found out that we were pregnant with twins, and we didn't do anything special to make that happen. Just
big surprise to us.
Just a big surprise. And so
I think that was God saying, you waited. I'll honor your desire to be a mom and have multiple kids. So here you go, multiples on your first pregnancy.
Yeah, totally. And so we had the twins, and of course that's a culture shock, going from a family of 2 to a family of 4. We doubled overnight. And so then we decided, you know what, let's take some time off from this having kids business. So we waited 5 more years.
We were busy.
Yeah. And then we had a daughter. We had a singleton, no more multiples in pregnancies after the first set. And then when she turned 6 months old, we were like, we're done. Like, that's it. I mean, hang it up. We're tired.
And getting pregnant with both those pregnancies came, in the first or second month.
First couple
pretty
tries,
easy for us. So we thought. And so I always thought I wanted 4 kids, but when Amber turned 6 months, we were exhausted.
Yeah.
We were like, I think we should be done.
Yeah. And so then my wife started getting the kid itch again.
Then I had a change of heart.
And then when our daughter was 18 months old, my wife said that she wanted her to have a sibling. And so that was a hard conversation. Yeah. I said, let's go out for a date night and then we'll talk. And so she's dreading it the whole time.
Yeah, that
And
was like a week later because I remember bringing
yeah,
it to you, like putting my heart out there. And he didn't say no. He didn't say, like, no, we're done. But he really needed to think about it. And so then when you said it was going to be, I'll tell you my answer on our date night, I'm like, I felt like you were going to break up with me or something. Like, going into that date night wasn't as special as our date nights now, but you needed to process and get back to me.
yeah. And so at the date night, drum roll, I said I was 100% in for one more. But it specifically had to be one. We couldn't have twins or anything, as if she would have some control over that. But no, that was in jest. But I said I was 100% in for one more, fully bought in, ready to go for another one. And on that try, we got pregnant just as easy as all of the previous times.
Yeah. So I got pregnant and started telling people, and they were so excited. And I think even shocked because we kind of had said we were done. And
Yeah.
so, but they were like, no, we wanted this. And so it was a few weeks into the pregnancy in December, we were going to make the big announcement on Christmas. But we had even told the kids,
Mm-hmm.
with Christmas PJs, we laid them out and had a little baby one and took pictures with them holding that and everything. That's what we were gonna post. But we had already had an ultrasound appointment, and so then we were going in for a second one. So it was December 22nd, 2020.
Well, we had our first ultrasound appointment at like 6 weeks or something, so pretty early on,
Mhm.
right? And there was no heartbeat at that one, but they said it might be too early
Mhm.
to see a heartbeat. So come back, we'll have another one in a couple weeks.
Yeah, so that didn't scare us
Yeah, we had a
because
picture.
yeah, I could see baby. They confirmed pregnancy. And we believe in, life at conception. And so that was our baby. And that's why we started telling people. And so the December 22nd one, again, I just thought it's going to be a better picture that we could then use to post and hear the heartbeat and, say this without getting emotional. That was confirmed when the ultrasound tech said, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. And started, without being graphic, but the miscarriage process that day, and finished the miscarriage process at home. So I was right before 9 weeks pregnant. But it was a very, very traumatic
Well,
experience
yeah,
for
especially
me.
miscarrying over Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Just the physical effects. I think people are like, oh, they were still so early. And that, I mean, there was a baby, and that baby came out, and so it wrecked me. It just wrecked me emotionally. Yeah, I had to pull myself together. I was in bed for like 2 days
mhm.
for physical stuff, but I had to pull myself together to come down for Christmas Eve dinner with the other kids and tell them and kind of get through Christmas and ignore the baby gifts and things like that.
Essentially break the news to all of our
Yeah.
family on Christmas that we had already told. So
Yeah.
that
And
was rough.
so, and others that I even started being, more outspoken about it is like, I was going to tell you on Christmas, but that I was pregnant, but then this happened because I just needed people.
Yeah.
And so even since then, I think that's why I continue to talk about it, because I felt so alone, even though everyone says like, oh, it's so common. Like,
Right.
I didn't know anybody
Yeah.
until I was that person.
Yeah. Well, and just to point out a piece of this picture that we haven't told yet, that actually isn't in our notes. So I'm going a little off script here. So in this miscarriage, I mean, this was not the first time you had
Yeah.
experienced this situation. When we were pregnant with our twins, you started feeling the symptoms of miscarriage, and we called the doctor, and that's when we found out we were having twins. We went in to get an ultrasound because you thought you were miscarrying. um, they told us there actually was likely a third
Mm-hmm.
that didn't make it. So you essentially miscarried one of triplets
Right.
and had a successful pregnancy with twins.
Exactly.
And so, but at that time, because you were still having a healthy pregnancy with the other two, the impacts and the emotions, I don't think really hit you in that miscarriage. They probably didn't hit you for real until you had this one. And so that's just a mind-boggling scenario
Yeah,
as
you're
well.
absolutely right. I buried that literally with that baby because emotionally, and didn't really talk about I didn't talk about it at all, because how could I say to the woman that had a miscarriage and lost her one and only baby that I miscarried and still got two babies at the
Right.
end of it? And so I just didn't feel that was right. And so you're right. I didn't process any of that
Mm-hmm.
emotions. It was just more of a matter of fact. It wasn't in my medical chart or anything. And then I remember when the twins turned one is when I was like,
Mm-hmm.
there would have been three.
Right.
Like, that's when I started thinking about that baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yes, when I miscarried in December 2020, whoa, the emotions.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
was
of like you
wrecked.
grieved two at the
Yeah,
same time then.
that's right.
And so,
It's a big piece of
um,
our story.
right. And so, continuing to move forward through this story, we decided, okay, we weren't done. We were going to try again and try and keep going. And everybody told us, we'd conceive again really quickly, as we always had. But now we struggled. This took us 6 months to actually be able to conceive again.
Hmm. That
And
was like actively
yeah,
trying.
consistent trying every single month, try disappointment over 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months in, I don't know if that feels long or not to, anyone listening, but when you're in it and you have been pregnant, I knew I could get pregnant, it was just kind of like, let's just fix this.
Yeah.
It was really confusing, and I was like tracking and everything. I'm like, I felt like I didn't know myself or my body, and so that just kind of spiraled me emotionally too.
Well, and then
It was exhausting too
you
for our
start
marriage.
thinking, like, was that our last
Yeah.
opportunity?
Yeah.
Like, did we miss our last opportunity? Not that it was anyone's fault,
Hmm.
but as you start having those failures month after month,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say failures for trying, but after you have those negative tests,
Right. Negative after
month after
negative.
month.
But then, so yeah, then bringing us to July 2021, I got the positive pregnancy test, and we were excited, but I don't think we didn't really go there like the, first two
Mhm.
pregnancies. And, but, I went, tried to go to get a doctor's appointment and everything. And before I could even get a first ultrasound, it was clear that we were losing that baby too.
Mhm.
And so, that was really, pretty early on. But again, just kind of the back to back of those losses, has been really hard. And I've been trying to open up about it. But as far as this podcast, we want to bring it into kind of how it affected our marriage and what we learned from it. Because I know there'll still be triggers and things from our trauma. But something Thomas and I are both committed to is, as we go through seasons of hardships, we're always like, what can we learn from this and how can we grow?
Mhm.
And that's why this series is titled Thriving, not just Surviving. Um, and so, if I'm being honest, each time I miscarried, I did find it really hard to relate to Thomas, relate to my husband. He was right by my side through it all. He really was, but I still felt so disconnected, and distant from him. I wanted I wanted my husband to be there for me. But more than that, I wanted him to feel what I was feeling. And I was so confused as to why he didn't express it the same way that I was.
And when you say feel what you were feeling, you're not looking at that from a point of view of, while you were physically going through it, you didn't want me to physically experience the same pain
Right.
because just to understand what you were going through,
More the
but emotionally, right?
emotions, yeah. So I journaled a lot, and I came up with this, like, it was like he was in a lifeboat and I was in the the water drowning. So, you thought you were going through everything. You thought we were going through everything together because you were floating right next to me, but you didn't feel the pain as intensely. And you didn't see my body differently. You would tell me that, but I did. I saw it as a coffin, to me. This is where life was dying inside of me. And then I felt like I was dying. And I was in great physical affliction with mental and emotional trauma. And I thought you had no feelings, honestly.
Well, this is literally the first time I've heard those metaphors out of your mouth. And so that hits hard. I mean, I really didn't know that you were feeling it from that visual standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we heard the visual of someone saying, it's like you're sitting on the couch next to each other, but you're miles apart,
Right.
or something like that. And that, made sense to me, but
because you were there for me. I want to make that clear. You didn't abandon me or leave me, but emotionally, I just, and we'll get to it later. I was putting false expectations on you, but, so it's like you were in the water with me, but it was like we were experiencing two different things.
right. And when you when you finally asked me why the losses didn't impact me the way that they impacted you, I admitted that nothing had changed for me. I wasn't having morning sickness or physical changes to my body, or anything like that. So besides the ultrasound pictures that we had the opportunity to see, there wasn't anything to attach me to the baby at that point. I had 2 other successful pregnancies with you that at some point along the way, I was able to actually feel the baby move and kick and hear heartbeats and things like that. Those things really attached me to those babies. And so with these 2 miscarriages specifically, not even the one with the twins, because again, that we had 2 successful, I guess technically that would be 2 successful pregnancies in one, but
I know.
two babies in that one. And so I it just, nothing had changed for me. And so I didn't really have anything to tie me to that or get me to a place where I could feel even remotely what you were feeling.
Yeah, so over time, I mean, this is still raw and it feels new, but we have grown a lot. So I did realize that I couldn't force my husband to process something that he wasn't capable of processing with me. And that's not to diss you intellectually or physically or anything like that. It's just men tend to say, get on my back and I'll get you there. So our miscarriage were one of those times that Thomas, he demonstrated that mentally and physically and emotionally for our family, like we did include the kids on this discussion. So he carried us. We were both sad, but grieved differently. And so as the husband, he was able to be sad and not show that on the outside because he thought I needed him to be strong in that way. And I realize that now.
Yeah. And I felt like I could only do what I could do, which was pick up more of the work on cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids and things like that. I could literally only do things. I couldn't take the pain from you. I couldn't take the emotional turmoil from you. So all I could do was stuff and tasks and things like that. And, most men want to be there to comfort and support their wives, but the truth is that they'll never fully be able to empathize with pregnancy loss because it's not something that our bodies are capable of going through. And so as we've had time to reflect on our marriage strife during our miscarriage grief, we want to give you some tips that we've both come up with to help you work through that.
Yeah, we actually got to talk about this on a road trip. We were just like literally not planning this podcast. So this is real life living material that just kind of tried to interview each other outside of those emotions a few months after it. And so we jotted things down and who knew that this would be the day that we get to hopefully help another couple through this.
Well, and in all reality, that talking through that topic is really what spawned the life of this podcast.
It's true.
Um,
Marriage puzzle in
yeah,
general. Yeah.
the concept of the podcast. I mean, we really honed in on miscarriage at first when we were talking about it, but then we just realized there was so much more that we felt like we could offer to people. And so yeah.
So we have three things, three categories that we're going to say a few things underneath. So I'm going to talk to the husband. So to the husband after miscarriage, and then Thomas will talk to the wife after miscarriage. And then we'll even touch on intimacy after miscarriage.
And I just want to clarify, you talking to the husband and me talking to the wife isn't trying to say, what me looking from the outside, what you need to do. Again, I can't empathize or understand what you're going through during a miscarriage, but for me to be able to help you, it's more on that side of things, or for you to be able to help me understand. That's where we're coming from.
What we experience from our story and our journey. So if this works for you. So to the husband after miscarriage, the first thing I would say is take the day or 2 days or a full week, whatever you can do, take it off work. Even if that's to lay in bed next to your wife, you're going to feel helpless, like Thomas had shared, but she should not be alone. Especially if you don't live near family, because at the time of our first miscarriage, we didn't have any family in the state. And so, but regardless, she should not feel alone during this process. So if you didn't get to do this when the miscarriage happened, if you're, listening and this has already been your experience, consider this gesture on days that seem to trigger your wife's memories. And then I think that's something Thomas did do, like when we got that, because you were at the appointment with me and we heard there's no heartbeat. Our world just stopped. And so that was something that, it didn't, yes, we had careers and everything, but just kind of, that will all be there. That's a vital day to just stop and be with your wife. 2, ask who you need to call to let them know. And, to let them know either with your wife or without your wife, let them know about the miscarriage. So be sensitive to who she wants to talk with alone and who she wants you to talk with alone, and then who you guys want to talk to together. Especially if you have, other kids like we did. We did that together. But there were certain family members that I wanted to do, and there were certain family members that I'm like, they need to know, but I'm not up for a phone call. So can you please handle that?
Yeah, so just to kind of clarify that one, I would be asking you, hey, who do we need to tell? 1, let's make a list. 2, who do you want to be on the phone to talk to? And who do you not want to be? Because obviously you don't want to keep reliving this over and over and over and just keep ripping the wound open, the emotional wound open. But some of it may actually be a little bit healing to feel that support from others.
Yeah. The third one I would say to the husband is let your wife talk to you. Be patient when drawing her out if needed. But, if you could devote 30 to 60 minutes or even longer if possible, just at a time to be quiet and listen. The truth is you won't ever understand, but you can try to be empathetic in this moment. And she needs that. Just validate her feelings and emotions. Just let her be, but be there for her. 4th, figure out your wife's love language. We talk about that a lot. So there's a book on our website, marriagepuzzle.com/books. But this was a huge opportunity that I'm glad Thomas knew my love language. So figure out your wife's love language and pour that out on her during this time. And then finally, 5 would be know that miscarriage is not a one-time event. Unfortunately, emotions can hit at any moment, so be supportive. Don't you dare say anything like get over it. And don't be, offended at your wife for having what will feel like the out of the blue emotions for months to come. Like I said, I'm still processing. it's much better now, but man, those things hit me out of the blue, and I just needed support and not like what that was so last December.
Mhm.
So be there for your wife.
Yeah. So now to the wife after miscarriage. So, number one, be fully open and transparent with your husband on how you're feeling. Really tell him, because we can't read your mind.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what you think, we can't. In fact, most of us couldn't even try. We're so forgetful and absent-minded sometimes anyway, and we compartmentalize things.
Mm-hmm.
So it really makes it difficult for us to even know how to react to your feelings if you don't actually tell us. Don't just say I'm fine. We know you're not. You can't get that past us. And we obviously know that you're going through something, especially in a situation where I was right there with you
Mm-hmm.
at the appointment to see and say, okay, well, this is about to come.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that you weren't fine, and knew that you were going through something. Um, Men tend to be fixers and try to, uh, and we try to fix something that we can control. So if obviously we can't fix the miscarriage, that's not something we can repair. We can't fix the emotions that you're going through, but wives, you can tell your husbands things that they can do to help. And like, you can't go to work today, like, or as the wife, I can't go to work today, so could you call my boss and let them know, or call my HR department, or um, I can't get out of bed because of the pain, the actual physical pain that I'm going through. Could you please fix dinner or figure out something for dinner?
Mm-hmm.
That those are things that we can do as men to feel helpful and to feel involved. So if you would just speak up and let us know those things, that will help us to be able to feel like we're helping you through this.
Yeah, but I mean, you just may not think about it in the intense moment for you too. If you're like, "How can I help?" and then the wife's like, "I don't know, I don't know." Really try to say, I need help with getting the kids covered. I need help with dinner. I need
Mhm.
help with all those things that you just listed." So, be specific.
Yeah, we already feel useless in the situation. So if there's anything we can do to feel useful and feel like we're fixing it,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is helpful. And husbands, just a side note here, know that um, you should know that if your wife does follow this advice and tells you things that you can do, that doesn't mean you're fixing the situation. So just because you cook dinner that one night doesn't resolve the whole issue. You have to know that, and know that you're just helping keep things running, keep things moving, take as much unnecessary stress off of her as you can. So, but again, we can't successfully do that without our wives telling us what we can do to be helpful. Number two, wives, tell your husband up front who you want to talk to about your miscarriage and who you aren't ready to talk to right now. We kind of talked about this a minute ago, but this is helpful to clearly state the expectations, even if they may change over time. And if someone calls or stops by to bring a meal or to check in on you, don't be afraid to ask your husband to step in and handle that. You may have a relationship with your parents where you want to talk to them every day because you know they're going to care for you, but you may also have a relationship with your parents that if you talk to them every day because they care so much for you, it's going to keep triggering you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may need to tell your husband, hey, I need you to field these calls. Like, you want to be on the first one, but I need you to field every one after that, just to kind of put that barrier in between. Not to separate you, not to drive a wedge between you and the relationship of anyone, but if you need that buffer to help you heal, you have to let us know how we can help you with that.
Well, I think that goes back to being specific, because we didn't have family close by, but we were part of, a church community that would bring us meals and stuff and really blessed us during that time. But I had to speak up to know like who could come, to my room and sit with me, and who like just, Thomas, you handle that, because it's really nice they brought a meal, but I really don't know them well enough to
Yeah.
invite them into this emotional state I'm in. And so I think that will just really help the emotions sometimes. This friend I do want, this friend, I'll see them next next time.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Number 3, as time goes on, wives, make sure you speak up to your husbands about the dates that will matter to you. Remind your husband along the way instead of expecting him to have put on his calendar what your anticipated due date was for that baby. To be honest with you, we probably don't know the due dates of successful pregnancies most of the time, all the way through. We may know the month, but
Hopefully
we
the
probably
birthday.
don't know the due date
Right.
in most cases. So in a failed pregnancy, that's even harder for us to remember, again, because we're not actually experiencing the physical changes along the way. It's more out of sight, out of mind for us. So make sure you speak up about those dates. And you may not know when they're going to hit, but you're probably going to know when that due date is as a wife, and you can remind your husband as it gets closer. Hey, I'm going back in my notes to see because I don't even remember. December 22nd. So
Well,
December 21st, you may tell me, hey, tomorrow is the day that
yeah.
we found out that there was no heartbeat.
And that did
And
trigger.
so,
It's been a year, and December 22nd, a year after that, was a hard day for
mhm,
me. And then also the due date was August 1st. And so we did go to the beach that day. But months before that, I
mhm,
was like, on August 1st, I want to go to the beach because I don't know how I'm going to be that day. So I just
right,
want to be able to be.
yeah,
So let's be off, take off work. My sister watched our kids, and we just were able to even go and heal again in that day. And that was great until, the year, anniversary. And I almost had like an anxiety
yeah,
attack. And so just being clear so that it's more of those heads up of emotions, and you could be okay, but
mhm,
do you want a card? Do you want to be left alone? Do you want flowers? Do you want to go somewhere?
yeah,
Speak up instead of just having these expectations, and then you know he might miss the mark and let you down, which is not intentional.
yeah.
They just don't know because it's not a birth date on a calendar.
Right. So number 4 is uh, don't let your husband feel hurt, personally rejected, or abandoned by you. And I know this seems a little backwards in this scenario because of what you're going through as the mother, who would be actually going through the miscarriage. But again, going back to the fact that your husband didn't uh, can't feel the same things that you're feeling physically and be able to fully empathize with what you're going through, that at some point for them they just start missing you. They feel lonely as well. I'm sure you felt lonely, right? I mean,
Yeah.
throughout the process in general, but then at some point along the line I'm like, well, now I've
You
lost my
lost,
wife
yeah, you
to
lost
this.
me.
And so, not even because of the stuff that I took on, because as a husband, I feel like that's my responsibility and my duty to step up and pick up, slack if you're going through something. It would be no different if you were just sick with a regular illness. Um, and so I can do those things. So it wasn't even about that, but it was more of just that now I've lost my spouse, my partner, to these emotions. And so I know that that's probably hard, but how would you kind of give advice from a wife's perspective on that? Because I needed to not feel rejected by you, or um, I didn't want to be lonely. I didn't want you to be lonely. So how would you kind of add to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think just just as the same as you wanting your husband to be, take the day off and be with you.
Hmm.
Like anything that I could muster up the courage to um be around you too.
Hmm.
Let you hold me when you're available to hold me, but also just watch TV and like
Hmm.
veg out if that's what you were doing.
Hmm.
So as much as I wanted you to be come to me for my emotions, I probably should have been more aware of how you were dealing with the grief as well, even if that looked differently. But just sitting with you in those tasks while
Hmm.
you made dinner or something,
Yeah.
to be more around you and
Hmm.
support of you as well.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about some intimacy tips coming up in a minute, and I think that will really help in this specific number 4 too, to really reconnect the two of you. But moving on to number 5, accept the pace at which your husband moves forward, even if it is more quickly than you thought it would be. And do this without feeling bitterness, abandonment, or resentment towards him. Release him of any emotional expectations, and appreciate him for who he is. And the way I look at this is, from my point of view as the husband in this scenario, yeah, I couldn't feel what you were going through. And so I got to kind of like the finish line, in air quotes, if you will, of grieving quicker than you did. Not necessarily there is really a finish line, but from a visual perspective, I got there quicker than you did, and so that was the place in which I could encourage you from. Not necessarily to say, okay, good, I'm through that, I'm done, wash my hands of that, move on.
Right.
But, got there so that I could cheer you on and help you through it in any way that I could, because, if the grieving process needs to happen, I don't want to talk down to anyone who is grieving in a different way than I did, but for me, I got through it quicker,
Right.
And was able to help you through it from there. Because if you're both just totally down, then it's really hard for you to, hard for one another to pick each other up. So if someone is a little bit more farther along, take advantage of that opportunity to have them help you along, allow them to help you along, and not be upset at them for not being where you're at. Look at that as a positive thing. And again, I don't want to talk down to anyone who both of you are grieving and feel full of sorrow about this, because that's totally fine as well. But from our story, that's how it worked for us.
Yeah, hopefully it's good perspective to see, instead of how I was feeling, like, why don't you feel like me? Say, like, that's good. I need to, be encouraged and get out of this, that life will go on. This is now my story and can help other people through it. So, for intimacy after marriage, we've said 3 things here, but it'll be interesting to talk about, because I don't think anyone would have this perspective unless they have gone through a miscarriage. And so my number one thing I tell people now is, before having sex again, like after the miscarriage process, talk about it well before you have sex. So talk about it before the act. This is like an out of the bedroom conversation, because you need to know, are you both on the same page and ready? And what does that mean? Are you going to prevent pregnancy? Like, do you need a break? And how are you going to prevent it? Or are you going to try to conceive again right away? This is just an important long-term conversation that you want to have, without ruining that physical moment.
Yeah, we actually had some tough discussions around this. Not again, not about the act itself, but about those bigger life circumstances that would come out of that. And so it was more so about, well, why, how are we going to pursue this? Are we going to start trying again immediately? Are you ready emotionally for that? Am I ready emotionally for that? Do we even want? Was this a sign for us to say, well, maybe we shouldn't, have more kids? You really have to have those bigger discussions, because in that moment, if you try to have those discussions in that moment,
You're
just going to end up in a fight, because it's not going to go well.
Yeah, and there's no right or wrong answer. For us, we did, like we already told you, we tried again right away after the first miscarriage. After the second miscarriage, in July, we did take a break, just from trying, not from having sex, but but we needed that to reconnect emotionally together, and physically, without the weighted the pressure. And that actually kind of leads into the second thing, is to be sensitive to the emotions that might come while having sex again after having a miscarriage. I think this is the thing that surprised me the most, because being intimate, since it is such an intimate act, being intimate after a loss can be a reminder of everything that was supposed to be good, a pregnancy, but then turned bad with a miscarriage. So let it be okay to stop and cuddle through that moment instead of overlooking those feelings. So you might be fine and ready to be intimate right away and not think about it. But if that's a trigger for you, and like it was for me, and I just started crying, husbands and wives, you need to be sensitive to each other's feelings in that and not rush it. It's not worth it. Just like lean into that and just kind of cuddle. And that's still being intimate, very intimately, then with your emotions and feelings as well.
And also just looking at it from a slightly different point of view, going back to talking about the emotions, who gets to the finish line first of grieving, that can be a trigger as well. I mean, if you're resenting your husband or wife for being farther along or farther behind in those emotions and not being ready to be intimate again, that's going to delay the process even more. And so make sure that you're not going into this as I have to do this type of a thing. You need to talk about those feelings and emotions and say, look, I'm not ready because I feel like you're not grieving, or I feel like you're taking too long to be ready to have sex again because you're taking so long to grieve. And there's, you don't want to come at those from an attacking point of view, but expressing those feelings will let you talk through it and will probably help you get back to being intimate sooner, because those feelings that you're talking about are such deep, intimate feelings. It's going to bring you closer together on just an emotional level, which is going to lead you back to the bedroom anyway.
Yeah, but that's our third and final point here is still don't take the romance out of your marriage. When trying to conceive, this time again, you're trying to conceive again after a loss, you can become so obsessed with the process instead of the person. And that's why we did take a break, because we found that was happening. At least it wasn't as romantic and intimate anymore, because it was just like
calculated.
a physical act of this is what the calendar says we need to do to make this happen. And so if you then are just obsessed with thinking about getting pregnant, and then you lose sight of the person you get to be intimate with, that can cause problems in your marriage. And so it's so important to see your spouse during sex in the most intimate way and not just a baby making machine. So if you focus too much on the latter, you'll be flirting with resentment toward your spouse if you don't become pregnant in the time frame that you desire.
Right. Well, thank you all for staying. We know we took this one a little longer than normal, but we feel like there was a lot of important information here, and we hope that you gain some great knowledge out of this, whether it's for yourself in this situation or for someone that you know, or just have insight for someone that you know is going through this. So we appreciate you hanging around through this one.
Yeah, thank you for letting us share our story and being able to open up. And I was really surprised that listeners asked for this. So I think that's, sometimes like, okay, if this is what I went through, then here I am going to share our pain and how we try to thrive and not just survive a miscarriage.
Yeah, that's great. Remember that you can always go and check us out. If this is your first time listening to us, make sure you go check us out on social media at Marriage Puzzle. You can check out our website, marriagepuzzle.com, and you can feel free to schedule a discovery call with us if you'd be interested in marriage coaching. Whether you're going through this or a different issue in your marriage, we can be there to try and help you along with that on a one-on-one level, not just from a listening point of view. And we hope that you'll join us back next week, where together we'll work on marriage, one puzzle piece at a time. See you later.
Have a great week.